Welcome to the High Pass Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Blackburn. Today I'm excited to introduce you to producer, recording engineer, and drummer extraordinaire, Colin Lester Fleming. Colin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. How are you today, Derek?
I'm doing great. I'm having a great day today. And it's a beautiful day. Fall is around the corner. Just had a great event last night with AES as well. We had like an event at Dorset Hall in Dorchester, and just had a really great time. Saw a lot of people out. Yeah, I'm right in the high of being around others.
The extrovert high. I love it.
The extrovert high. That's true.
That's great, man.
I'd really love to just kind of get into it and get to know you and what your background is. How did you get started as a musician? What was it like when you were growing up? Did you take formal lessons, or what was your initial interest like in?
Totally. So I started pretty young. I started in 5th grade. I was always a music lover. Well, I guess I started as a musician even before that because my dad was a huge music lover. He actually had a pretty awesome hi-fi that I didn't realize how awesome it was at the time. He had like switchers and like it sent audio through the whole house and like different rooms. And he had a whole situation for his CD player and record player. And so the music was always around, and I always loved music, and I always, loved what he played. It was a lot of classic American singer-songwriter stuff back in the day, 60s and 70s. So there was music always around, so I was always a music lover. In terms of me being a music performer, I was a benefactor of an excellent school system growing up. I grew up outside of Chicago in the suburbs, and we had great band programs throughout my elementary school, junior high, and high school. And so in 5th grade, I was really into the movie Rudy, and Rudy has a killer soundtrack and score that features a really great orchestral score. And I was really into it. And so when it came time in 5th grade to try out different instruments, we got to try 2 instruments. And so I chose violin because of the score. And I chose drums just because, being a 5th grader, wanting to hit stuff with sticks. I tried violin. I was terrible. I was really, really bad. Even the band director was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't play that instrument. They handed you a violin for a sec and that was it. And then he handed me some drumsticks, and I had fun, and I really enjoyed it. And it was free to join the band program at school. You just went in the mornings twice a week to go play in the wind ensemble. And you also got during school lessons once a week. So you had like a half-hour group lesson with 4 or 5 different kids. And so I went through 5th and 6th grade, really into that. I really liked the social aspect. I really liked playing music, learning how to read music. And then 7th and 8th grade came, where we go to a different school, and that was a different band director. She was great, but she was also much more of the classic kind of stuffy band director that did not like it when we made more noise than we had to. And so that was probably the closest I ever came to like not doing music. But of course it was like my best friends were in the percussion section. And so I just stuck it out. And then once I got into high school, we had a really great band director, Matt Moore. And he was also a drummer. He was like a jazz guy. And he had a really great band program. There was 4 different levels of kind of how far you wanted to go. There was like the intro, concert band, they called it, for freshmen. And then there was 2 intermediary ones, and then there was the Wind Symphony, which was the top one. And Mr. Moore just spoke of it really highly, and they did really great things. And I, had a little ambition, I guess, as a freshman in school. And that's when I decided I wanted to take it seriously. And I really wanted to make the Wind Symphony and like really be good at it. Also, there was drumline, and I really wanted to do drumline just because.
Yeah, that's huge, right?
The movie Drumline had just come out, and so I was very into that. But so I was taking lessons at the time, private lessons, one-on-ones, and I was doing 2 different types of lessons. I was doing the ones at school, which were like percussion, and I started then also doing drum set lessons, and that was outside of school because they didn't have that at the high school. And I remember going to my symphonic one-on-one teacher, Mike Kazakis, and he subbed with the Chicago Symphony and played at Ravinia, and he was really doing the freelance percussionist thing.
I just want to mention that Ravinia in Chicago is a outdoor venue very similar to Tanglewood in the Berkshires here in New England.
And it was sophomore year. I'd gotten into Wind Symphony, but I wanted to like take it to the next level. Like I really liked what I was doing, and I liked seeing that practicing made me better. And it was a very clear like thing, like practice these things, get better, and then make it into better ensembles, do better things. And he, saw that I was really into it, and I worked and I practiced a lot, and so he recommended that I check out the Wheaton Municipal Band. And the Wheaton Municipal Band is this group in Wheaton, Illinois, that meets. They do 10 concerts every week during the summer, and it's a classic like amateur group. It's made up of mostly like band directors, folks that want to play during the summer, and so it's a really actually great group. You have to audition to get in, and the cool thing about the Wheaton Band was that you would rehearse 10 new pieces Wednesday night for 3 hours, and then Thursday you would perform them. And so it was like a very quick turnover, and you have to be like really present and care about what you're doing and get into it. And also you get paid. You get like $150 for a rehearsal and a performance, which for a junior in high school was pretty awesome. And so that was my first time getting paid to play music. I auditioned for the Wheaton Municipal Band. I got in. I did 2 summers with them. And then I got to junior year. I think that must have been junior year. And my teacher also recommended that I check out the Chicago Youth Symphony, which is like a citywide orchestra that folks audition in the whole state to get in. And that was like the first like serious audition that I took. And I did 2 seasons with them, and they we went to Europe to play 10 shows, and we played Symphony Hall in Chicago, which was huge for me, super cool. And then I went to college originally to be. I went to Boston University. I auditioned and got in and went to BU to study orchestral percussion performance. That was going to be my major. That was going to be like the career track. BU was a very like audition prep school, and so it was just practice. Like that's all you do. And the folks
Right.
in the symphony were in the Boston Symphony. We had 2 of the we had the timpanist from the BSO and also another percussionist teaching there. And so it was just a very audition prep school, and it was a very intense program. And that's where I really got to know like kind of the orchestral world, and it didn't end up totally being my thing. It's a very, all the power to the folks that play that music and do that thing. But it's a very specific type of person that will practice, 12 hours a day
Definitely.
doing like soft rolls, and then like medium soft rolls, and then kind of soft rolls, and then soft plus rolls. It's like you're really in the nitty gritty of performing. But there's very little creative outlet in that world. It's just, playing sheet
Right.
music, playing music somebody
Yeah.
else wrote, how a conductor wants to hear it. And, that's great and awesome, but just, it really kind of bummed me out. And also the folks in the program, it was, because we're all auditioning for the same jobs eventually. And, you're walking through practice rooms and people can hear you and you can hear other people. And so it was just, it was a very, I don't want to say cutthroat because folks aren't not nice, but there's a definite undertow of how good are you? What's your rank? Kind of. It felt
Yeah.
very stuffy and very tight. And so junior year came, and all of a sudden I was failing a bunch of classes and I wasn't practicing, and I was like, why do I hate this so much? And I was like, oh shit, maybe I just kind of hate this. Maybe I just don't like this.
Yeah.
And so after first semester junior year, I came home. I had a scholarship at the time. I had a full scholarship to go to BU to do that thing. I lost it, because my grades were bad and I wasn't practicing. And so the choice came like, do I really want to do this? I decided not. I decided I did not really want to do that.
I would just love to talk about just for a minute here about how I'm also from Illinois, and I know that we kind of grew up in a similar, not in the same area, but in a similar kind of area. And there's one thing, I've been here since 2005 here in Massachusetts, and the something that's really interesting to me, having a child who is now, entering 7th grade, who has also been in the music programs here, is it is
Mhm.
completely different than the way you and I experienced music
Really?
education. And not
Really?
better or worse, but I remember exactly what you described, in 5th, 6th grade. being in band, having those lessons, going to solo and ensemble competitions all over the state,
Mm-hmm.
participating in youth orchestra and things like that. And
Yep.
just like is an absolute like ecosystem of music
Yeah.
education that in many discussions with people who grew up here, they did not have.
Really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
And in fact, it's something that my wife and I talk about every once in a while because she grew up in Lynn, and in that school system, they did not have an arts program. They didn't
Wow.
have a
Yeah.
music program.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
she sometimes, says that she's a little jealous that like I I grew up in, this a metropolitan area, but
Yeah.
30,000 people or so. But I grew up in this area where there was like, you know, there's band and there's choir and there's like
Mm-hmm.
all of these like, like you said, municipal band. We had the Kankakee Valley Symphony Orchestra. We had the Chicago Chamber Brass. Like,
Yeah. There's a ton.
like we had all of these things that were kind of built in so that if you were a young person coming up in that time period, there
Mm-hmm.
were so many opportunities for
Exactly.
you.
Totally. There's such like
So,
an inbuilt community for you to just be a part of if you wanted to, and that's just luck of the draw. I happen to be in the right place,
yeah,
you know?
absolutely. So,
Yeah.
I love that you went through that because like when you were talking through your experience, I remember those times like
Yeah.
very very fondly.
Totally.
Especially the like the band directors, the educators, the people who like had dedicated their lives to educating youth in music.
Yeah.
Um
There's such passion for it everywhere,
yeah,
You
yeah.
really
I
felt
mean
that.
those people were a huge part of where I am today.
Totally.
100%.
100%.
100%.
Yeah. Completely agree. And like even before like the actual like lessons and performing came in, like my first musical memory is like second grade when we had to do like school plays, and then it was basically just a musical. Like we would sing and dance and like perform for our school. And I remember we did one, and there was one part where everybody started clapping, and they hadn't done that before during like the clapping on the two and the four. And like that was where I was like, holy cow, I actually really like this is like
Yeah.
I love performing. Like it's making something happen that is really exciting and cool. And I think maybe that was like the little seed, the little germ that planted. And um, yeah,
Yeah.
and that was just because it was at my
That's
school.
that sort of collaborative experience from when we were young, bringing that with you is a huge thing.
Mm,
It's just like those experiences have made me very much what I am today, and I'm
hmm.
really glad that we could talk about that. So you went back to Chicago, and you're trying to figure out what you were going to do next.
Moved back in with my parents and my brother and my sister, sharing a room with my older brother once again. Yeah, just kind of went through it. Like I got a job doing mosquito abatement one summer. I like went to like go learn how to sell vacuums one day, and like just got random odd jobs. And then right near me in Palatine, Illinois, there was this shop called the Drum Pad, which you might know. But the Drum Pad was like an institutional drum and percussion shop in the northwest suburbs.
Yep.
They put on clinics all the time, and it was just like a major place to go and like hang and be with drummers. And so that was always like the coolest place for me. It was kind of like a little mini church where I got to go and like play cymbals and play the drum sets that they had set up and go hang out. And I ended up able to get a job there because there's big dramatic story about how a bunch of the staff ended up leaving and opening their own shop, Vic's Drum Shop in the Chicago Music Exchange. So up randomly, just one day, like 90% of the staff just up and left, leaving Jim, the owner, in just a shitty spot. And I just happened to be in there one day and asked if he needed help, and lo and behold, he did. And that's when I got to be part of this community that I was really excited to be a part of. This drummer musician community where all the teachers were full time drummers and teachers and performers, and everybody coming in was a drummer and a performer. And I spent 3 years there, just getting to know the nitty gritty of playing drum set, like because I had played drums all through high school, played drum set rather, and taken lessons, but I had never taken it as seriously as like the orchestral symphonic side. And so this was my chance to like really dive into just drum set. And I ended up playing some GB gigs. I played in bands for a couple of years and just kind of got into what it was to be a freelance drummer for a couple of years. And in that time, I stayed very close with a singer-songwriter. We ended up getting together at that time, and she was from Boston. We met my freshman year at BU, and she flew me out to play some shows with her. She came out here to play, or out to Chicago to play some shows. And so I ended up moving back to Boston in 2013, initially to be with her. The Northwest suburbs are great, but I did not see myself being there forever. And seeing these drummers and teachers, like older guys, with families and doing the thing, and I love them and they're great, but I just didn't really see that for myself, teaching lessons and playing GB gigs on the weekends. And so I went to Boston, not totally sure exactly what was going to happen. I ended up playing a fair amount of musical theater just because I was playing drum set and I could read music and I could play quietly, which is helpful for musical theater.
Right.
And so, I did a lot of musical theater. I played in a country GB band, just like started getting into the network and getting to know Boston.
When you say GB, what does that mean?
General business band. So GB is a band that gets hired by like wedding bands and event bands and does that kind of stuff. And I played in one that was just country music, but was hired to play usually like 2 or 3 45-minute or hour-long sets. So usually like a 3-hour gig, get paid some money, play some drums and kind of do the thing. And did that for like a year and a half. And Krista, or my girlfriend at the time, now my ex, she had just graduated Berkeley. She recommended I check it out. So I did, because I was like, I have, 2.5 years at BU. I should probably finish a degree and kind of do the thing. And so I went to Berkeley initially to be like a drum set performance, like to do musical theater or just kind of, get a degree and see what happens after that. And part of the program at Berkeley is there's a Music Technology 101 course, MTech 101, that you have to take. Everybody has to take it. That's where you learn like GarageBand, you learn the basics of Logic, the basics of Pro Tools, and kind of using an interface and like the extreme basics of recording. And mine, again, luck has been on my side most of this time. And my teacher at the time was a guy named Stephen Crows, and he came from LA. He worked with Fleetwood Mac, he worked with Dolly Parton, he worked as a producer for a bunch of people. He was also a composer for Star Trek Next Generation. So he was just like a great producer, performance guy. And I had the benefit of going to Berkeley a little older. So I was like 26 at the time, 25 or something like that. And so I made more of an effort to actually be, close to my teachers and kind of meet the people and work the network a bit more than I did at BU. And so I went to meet Steven, and Steven was just the nicest, coolest guy ever. And he, heard my story, the same one I'm telling you. And, the whole time, like in high school and in college, I'd been recording a little bit, but like, where I was most excited was in the studio, like recording with bands. And Steven heard that and he was like, well, you should check out the recording program that we have here at school. Like, it's here and you can learn how to do the thing. And so I did and fell completely head over heels with recording. That's where I met Mike Deneen, producer, legendary producer, engineer, Susan Rogers, absolutely incredible human and scientist. And so really got to know, how to record and how to be in a studio and the nuts and bolts of signal flow and all that madness. And that's where I completely fell in love with recording. And that was 2016, 2015-ish. And so that's when I got my first internship and really dove deep into recording and producing.
Yeah, let me ask you, your experience with recording before that period of time, what was that like? Did you have like a general idea of like signal flow and how things worked, or were you just more on the musician side and you were...
I was way in the music side. I had recorded a number of like EPs and demos with bands like in the Midwest. So I had been in the studio, but I didn't know what a preamp was. I didn't know what a condenser mic was. I didn't know any of that. My first like hands-on experience with recording myself was sophomore year at BU, I had GarageBand on my laptop, and like, you know, most or like a lot of folks, I had an acoustic guitar and convinced myself that I was writing songs, and had a couple demos of things that I wrote where I was, playing the guitar part, and then I had a djembe because, of course, I had a djembe, and overdubbed some djembe onto it to give it some vibe or whatever, and
I love it.
so that was really it.
So that was it. But when you started going into the studio and getting familiar with, like, all of the gear and the control room and everything, how was it natural? Was it just kind of like, okay, everything makes sense? Or, was there a little
No,
bit of a learning curve?
I had a huge learning curve. Yeah, it took a long time to really understand, how things go from A to B, and because getting to know recording is getting to know electricity and electronics, and so it took me a long time to get around that side of it. And again, I was, a benefactor of really good education. The program at Berkeley really took you through those nuts and bolts of how analog studios work, and how things are supposed to work. So I would say it took me, a couple of years to really get comfy being in a studio. But I was also, again, there's, I have some ambition for sure, and so like it was, I took every chance I could to be in the studio, and I had a lot of band friends that I was, asking to go to the studio, and just trying to find every chance I could to be in, to practice and learn. And they had a couple opportunities where you could record ensembles a couple days a week, and I got to do that for a couple different ensembles. And I just kind of took advantage of what was in the system.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you recorded outside of the Berkeley studios?
Yes, the first time I recorded outside of the Berkeley studios was so my girlfriend at the time, Krista, she was a singer-songwriter. She was produced by this guy called Charles Haynes, Charlie Mikes. Charles is my homie. Love Charles. He's actually from East St. Louis, so we got some Midwest blood.
All right.
And Charles had a studio. He's had a couple studios. He bounces around, but Charles recorded Krista, and I got to meet Charles and kind of be in the studio with them and kind of hang out when I was just learning. And Charles was all about, vibe first. It's about the man and not the machine kind of vibe. And so I got to really learn like how sessions worked, and like how, we're here to do a thing, and, recording is not just about the gear. But so anyways, so I got to be in on some sessions, and I got to intern with Charles at his studio, Herd Studio in Roxbury, Mass. So the first time I got to record, I think it was a band that I was pretty good friends with called Honeysuckle. And Honeysuckle, no, I hired. So one of the things they have at Berkeley is like a recording contest. And I, of course, was like, I'm going to produce one of Krista's songs that I really like, and like enter the recording contest. And so I hired some musicians to do the song, and we recorded at Herd Studio. And that was, I think, my first recording experience.
Yeah.
Outside of Berkeley.
And you were just like, you felt like you were in your element.
Yeah,
the
great. Studio is always the coolest place for me, making something that didn't exist before you walked in, and, is hopefully better for, having gone through that process. And like that finding that inspiration, that cool thing in the studio is always like the most exciting thing to me. And I think when I was playing in that band in Chicago, like in like 2009 or 10, we had this song, and we went into the studio, and while we were there, we realized like, the bridge, what if we did this thing instead? And like, it turned into this whole other thing, like in that moment. And that was like the coolest thing to me.
It's huge.
Yeah.
So what was your transition like from kind of learning the ropes of being in the studio and production to kind of how you got your start and what you're doing now?
It's a hard question because it wasn't like a linear path from like directly from A to B. It was like I was starting to work some sessions at Herd just because I was really anxious to start working and not, just be learning. So like every internship I've had, my number one goal has been for the internship to end as soon as it possibly could so that I could be working.
Yeah.
And so like I'm a big believer of not waiting until you feel like you're 100% ready to start doing stuff. And so pretty soon after working at Herd for a bit, I started and getting some sessions as an engineer, seeing some cool sessions. The best part about being an engineer or an intern is getting to see how folks work their sessions, and you just get to kind of fit into it. And so there's a lot of learning to do of just like watching people work their stuff. Yeah, there were a couple singer-songwriters that I got to know and, got to trust. And as you know, like working in audio is like relationships, building relationships and pulling on threads, knowing that like it takes a lot of time to get to a working relationship. It's very often, at least for me, that like I meet somebody and immediately start working with them, or at least it was then.
Right.
And so, yeah, so, you just make friends and go to shows of artists that you believe in, and they see you at their shows and they see you working at studios. And so they feel comfortable coming to you for studio stuff. And so I got to work with that band Honeysuckle that I really, really love. And I got to work on their LP with them, and that LP like did pretty well, like for them. Like they got, a couple of Boston Music Award nominations, and they were touring a lot and really doing the thing. And so that I think was probably the first like production where I was like, okay, like this works, like it works for me, it works for them, and it feels good, And so that's when I started really, charging for the work that I do, and, taking the business side of it a bit more seriously, that like if I want to make a career out of doing just this, I need to start charging for it, and I need to treat it in some respects like a business, and get paid for the work that I do.
Yeah. And so you are a staff engineer at Q Division.
Yep.
In Cambridge. Or is it
it's technically Cambridge?
It's technically
Cambridge, it's right on the line, though, right on Ringe Ave. Yep.
Okay. Okay. And tell me about how that transpired. How did you get into Q Division?
Yeah, so I had been working at Herd for a couple of years, and Herd was a co-ownership between Charles, who owned all the gear, and this guy that we called Skywalker. I'm not sure where that name came from, but that's how he went. I'm pretty sure his name is John, but we all called him Skywalker. And
we need a name. We need a name,
seriously,
like that.
And so Skywalker, his whole thing was he was the lead architecture designer for all of the installation art at Burning Man. That was his like main gig.
Oh.
So he was hardly ever at the studio. He would only ever drop in. It was just kind of a creative space. I think that he just liked being in a creative environment, and so he let Charles use the space. But so Skywalker was hired by Fire Festival. Do you remember Fire Festival? And so,
oh yeah, Fire Festival was the failed festival that was supposed to be on a private island that was started by some investors.
Exactly. So Skywalker was quote unquote hired by Fire Festival to do a bunch of work, and he invested some large sum of money. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but he invested in material and started building and working, and the bottom fell out of all that, and that is when Herd closed, unfortunately. So we had to get out of there and kind of find a new space. And part of what I loved about the Herd space was that it was just a real creative vibe to be in. Like you walked in and you just kind of felt like you were already kind of apart from the world. Like you were just in a place just to do what you're there to do. And like, it was one of those classic, like kind of scary neighborhoods where folks, it's like in a building that whenever people came to the studio, you would get the call of like, I think I'm here. Like, this is the address, but I don't know what I'm walking into. And you had to like open a big garage door and go up some stairs past like an art studio where they were always doing some like crazy woodwork or some crazy shit, and open this big sliding door and like come into Herd where there's like a Skywalker was really into buffalo for some reason. Like we had like buffalo pillows and like photos of buffalo around, and but the first thing you saw when you walked in was just a giant buffalo head mounted on the wall. And so like it was just like immediate vibes, you know, like it just felt really good. That's and so kind of great. Weird in a good way to be there. But so that became really important to me, just like a place that feels right to be in to record, which isn't true of all studios, or at least that, you know, doesn't connect with everybody. Not every studio connects with everybody, let's put it that way. And so it became really important to me to connect to the space that I was in. And so Charles found a new space down in Quincy, Mass, which was pretty inconveniently far from where I was living at the time. And the space was in, you know, a basement of a bank. Like it's just like a very office-y feeling, short ceilings, just kind of stuffy, and didn't feel very good. And so around that time, probably 2018. Unfortunately, that was around the time that Mike Deneen passed. And Q held a memorial for him. And I had taken a couple of classes with him, so we weren't close, but we were friendly. And so I went to the memorial with a friend of mine, Claire Go. Claire was an intern at the time and great singer-songwriter, musician, studio person. She's now out in LA, but she was like my best friend at the time. And so Claire and I went to Mike's memorial at the Missessian Hall in Watertown, and being there, like among the Q community and family, like it was a huge event. There were probably like 200 or 300 people there, all just like completely, brokenhearted over Mike, who was this like, you know, major community tentpole in the Boston area. And Q was like just a major thing. And I had always known about Q, and I had started taking some sessions there because Herd had closed, and I'd still had production clients. So I'd started bringing some sessions in and kind of getting to know the studio and the assistant engineers there and some of the staff. But I had, not really made a huge relationship. But once I got to the memorial, it was like, wow, this is like a really special community that they've built of people that really care about community and care about this thing that we do. And so that just felt really special. And that was when I applied, that was on a Saturday, and I'm pretty sure Sunday morning I applied for an internship as soon as I could, just to be part of that community, and knowing that, I needed a space, but also I just really wanted to be part of this thing. And so I was very fortunate to, Q, the way they do it is on an internship, you just have a set day that you go in. And so I had Sundays, which was a good day because, weekends are typically the time when the cooler sessions come in. And so I got to intern for a year or so, and I had a bunch of experience having worked at Herd and worked on some cool projects with Charles. And so they started trusting me pretty early to work some sessions. And like I said before, my aim with any internship is to end it immediately. And so as soon as I got the opportunity to start doing some work, that's when my internship ended. And that's when I got to just engineer some sessions for Q. And it's been a really great, that was started 2023. It's like 5 years ago.
So when you started working at Q after your internship, what was your purview of Boston music and your part in the Boston music community? Where do you kind of see yourself in the community like that?
It's a big question, and so it brings a lot of thoughts.
I love big questions.
Me too. And so, what I want for things that I produce, I specifically have like built my kind of, I'll use your word, purview of like all the things that I do, so that production is not necessarily the one thing that is like the bill payer or like the money maker, which, don't get me wrong, it is part of it, but I don't want production to be the thing that I rely on to pay the bills, because I think making records is a very special thing, and I don't want it to ever feel like work proper, like something that I have to do so that I can eat.
Sure.
And I think that energy for me can make it toxic, and not for the music and not for the art, which is what I really want. So that's kind of where I see myself in terms of the thing that I want to provide, is like a safe space and a dedicated space to take seriously the art of record making, and to like it's important and it's hard and it requires like presence of mind and like dedication and focus and not stress. And so I guess to answer your question of the thing of the space that I want to provide in the community is, I guess, just a safe, hardworking, dedicated space to make something really great and unique.
Yeah. Do you work out of any other studios besides Q?
I do. I work at a studio in Parsonsfield, Maine. I should say I'm actually based in Portland, Maine. I'm no longer based in Boston. I still work at Q and I'm still in Boston quite a bit, but Portland is now home base. And so about an hour straight west of Portland, in the middle of nowhere, is this incredible white farmhouse called Great North Sound. And Great North is a destination home-style recording studio, where instead of like booking a few hours at a time at a place like Q, or at a lot of studios where you just kind of book one-off sessions where you go in and kind of do a project piecemeal that way. Great North's whole design is that it's literally a home that has a recording studio in it now. And so there's 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, beautiful property that it's on. And so the mentality there is to, instead of booking kind of one-off piecemeal sessions, to book like a week or 4 or 5 days to hunker down and like be in just that project. And so I've really gotten to know, and that the reason I started working at Great North was very similar between Herd and Q, was because Q closed. Powered down for a move in 2021, had some clients, needed a place to work, and had been recommended Great North by a few folks, and met with Sam Kassir, the owner, also a killer musician, killer producer, great engineer. And Sam and I connected on a lot of the ways and that we care about music and make music, and got to know his space and have been working there ever since.
Colin, I just want to thank you and express my gratitude for you being on the show today. I really appreciate your perspective and your, stories about how you grew up as a musician and your transition from being a musician to a recording engineer and producer. And I think it's a story that a lot of people can relate to. I definitely can. Coming from the Midwest, as you did, and being a recording engineer here as well. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Attention New England audio professionals. If you would like to attend one of our social gatherings, the next Boston AES social gathering will be at Q Division Studios on September 20th, 2023. Please go to bostonaes.org and sign up for our newsletter. Instructions on RSVPing for this event will be contained within.